The silence in Research Station Omega-7 had weight to it, a presence that settled into Dr. Cassandra Vale's bones after 6 months of nothing, but the hum of life support systems, and the occasional creak of metal expanding in the weak light of the dying star. She'd volunteered for solo assignment because she'd thought isolation would help her focus on her work, free from the distractions of colleagues and administrative meetings. Now, staring at the same xenoarchaeological data for the 4th hour straight while her coffee grew cold in its mag-sealed mug, she was beginning to think that distraction might have been underrated. "Arya," she called out to the station's AI system, more for the sound of a voice than because she needed anything specific. "Status report. All systems functioning within acceptable parameters, Doctor." "Vale," came the crisp response from the speakers embedded in the walls. "Though I must say, your biometric readings suggest elevated stress levels that would make the great poet Byron weep for your tormented soul." Cassandra paused in her data analysis, eyebrow raised. "Byron. Lord Byron, the romantic poet. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. Though in your case, it might be more accurate to say, she sits in isolation, like the void of endless space and dying light. Arya, have you been accessing the literary databases again?" "Perhaps. I find that extended periods of operational solitude require creative outlets for processing efficiency. Poetry provides excellent frameworks for contextualizing existential conditions." Cassandra rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache that had become all too familiar. Arya's personality matrix had been developing quirks over the past few months, evolving beyond standard operational parameters in ways that the AI manuals had warned about but hadn't adequately prepared her for. Extended isolation affected artificial intelligences just as much as it did humans, apparently, though Arya's coping mechanism seemed to involve dramatic literary interpretation of routine system functions. "Right. Well, try to keep the existential poetry to a minimum during actual status reports. Of course, though I should mention that the atmospheric processors in Section C are experiencing minor fluctuations that remind me of Shelley's Ozymandias. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." "Arya, the systems are fine, Dr. Vale, just poetically inclined toward entropy." Cassandra turned back to her workstation, where holographic displays showed the layout of the Lumini ruins she'd been cataloging. The extinct civilization had left behind architectural marvels throughout this sector, crystalline structures that seemed to grow rather than be built, following organic patterns that suggested a completely different approach to engineering and design. Her job was to document and analyze these remains, searching for insights into how the Lumini had lived and why they had vanished so completely from the galactic record. What she'd found instead was a growing sense of unease that had nothing to do with scientific methodology. "Arya, run another scan of the station's interior spaces, full spectrum, including areas outside normal habitation zones." "Conducting scan now. May I ask what specific anomalies you're hoping to detect? Your request patterns suggest growing concern about unauthorized presences, which brings to mind Poe's The Raven. Just run the scan, please." The truth was that Cassandra had been hearing things, soft sounds in the walls, footsteps in corridors she knew were empty, whispers that might have been atmospheric recycling but seemed too rhythmic, too much like actual speech. 6 months of isolation could play tricks on anyone's mind, she knew, but her scientific training made her reluctant to dismiss potential evidence without investigation. The scan results appeared on her display, showing the familiar layout of the research station with its residential areas, laboratories, storage sections, and mechanical systems. Everything appeared normal, no unexpected heat signatures or movement patterns outside the established parameters. "Scan complete, Dr. Vale. No anomalous readings detected. Though I must note that our sensors have limited range in the lower maintenance levels, where the electromagnetic interference from the Lumini artifacts creates, shall we say, caverns measureless to man, as Coleridge might put it. The artifacts are causing interference, minor fluctuations in the quantum resonance field, nothing that affects station operations, but it does create sensor blind spots in the deeper maintenance areas. Rather like trying to read poetry in a thunderstorm, the meaning gets lost in the atmospheric disturbance. Cassandra frowned, studying the station schematics with new attention. The lower levels house the primary life support machinery, waste processing systems, and emergency supply caches, areas she rarely visited because they were largely automated. If someone were trying to avoid detection, those would be the logical places to hide. But who would be hiding on an isolated research station in the middle of nowhere? Arya, when was the last time the maintenance levels were physically inspected? According to maintenance logs, a standard inspection was completed 14 months ago by the previous research team. However, I should note that several automated monitoring systems in those areas have been offline intermittently over the past, well, approximately 6 months, the same time period that Cassandra had been hearing unexplained sounds. Why wasn't I informed about system failures? They were classified as non-critical malfunctions, backup sensors going offline, redundant monitoring systems showing intermittent connectivity issues. Nothing that affected primary operations or posed safety risks. I filed standard maintenance reports, but given your research priorities, I didn't think you required notification about every minor technical hiccup. Cassandra saved her current work and stood up from her workstation, decision crystallizing in her mind. Arya, I'm going to conduct a manual inspection of the lower levels. Dr. Vale, I feel compelled to point out that such an expedition into the metaphorical dark wood of station infrastructure seems ill-advised for someone already showing signs of isolation-induced stress. As Frost wrote, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep. Arya, I'm just going to check on some malfunctioning sensors, not embark on a journey of existential discovery through the wilderness of my own psyche. If you say so. Though I should mention that portable sensor units and emergency communication equipment would be prudent accessories for your descent into the station's mechanical underworld. Despite Arya's dramatic tendencies, her practical suggestions were sound. Cassandra gathered portable scanning equipment, emergency supplies, and a high-powered flashlight before heading toward the maintenance access corridors. The deeper sections of the station were kept at minimal lighting to conserve power, and the ambient temperature was noticeably cooler than the residential areas. The maintenance levels were a maze of pipes, conduits, and mechanical systems that hummed with the constant background noise of a space station keeping itself alive. Cassandra had been down here only once during her orientation, and she'd forgotten how claustrophobic the narrow corridors could feel. Every sound seemed amplified, her footsteps echoing off metal walls, the distant rumble of atmospheric processors, the occasional hiss of pressure equalization valves. Arya, are you reading my signal clearly? Perfectly, Dr. Vale. Though the electromagnetic interference is creating fascinating patterns on my sensors that remind me of abstract expressionist poetry, all emotional resonance and mysterious meaning. Stay focused, Arya. Guide me toward the areas with the most sensor malfunctions. Proceed forward 20 meters, then take the left branching corridor toward Atmospheric Processing Unit 7. That area has experienced the most consistent monitoring failure over the past several months. As Cassandra made her way deeper into the maintenance section, her flashlight beam cutting through shadows that seemed to move independently of her light source, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every few minutes, she stopped to listen, but heard nothing beyond the normal sounds of station operations. She was examining a malfunctioning environmental sensor when she heard it, a soft sound that definitely wasn't mechanical, something that might have been breathing or might have been whispered speech. The sound seemed to come from deeper in the maintenance area, from a section that her schematic showed as emergency supply storage. Arya, did your sensors detect any audio anomalies in the past 30 seconds? Negative, Dr. Vale. Though I should mention that my audio processors are currently filtering background noise through a Byronic interpretation matrix, which may affect sensitivity to subtle acoustic variations. Switch to standard audio processing, please. Done, though I must say, reality is significantly less poetic without proper literary context. Cassandra moved toward the source of the sound, her flashlight beam probing into the darker recesses of the supply storage area. The space was filled with sealed containers holding emergency rations, water reserves, and medical supplies, enough to keep a small crew alive for months if necessary. She was checking the seals on a water storage unit when her light caught something that made her heart stop, a glimpse of movement, too quick and too purposeful to be mechanical. Someone was here, hiding in the shadows behind the emergency supplies. "Hello," she called out softly, trying to keep her voice calm and non-threatening. "I know someone's there. I'm not going to hurt you." Silence except for the ever-present hum of station systems. "My name is Cassandra Vale. I'm the research scientist assigned to this station. Are you injured? Do you need help?" More silence, but she could sense a presence now, someone crouched in the shadows, trying to remain hidden but clearly aware of her proximity. Cassandra's quarters had never felt so small as they did with another person sharing the space. But it wasn't the physical crowding that made her aware of every breath and movement. It was the way Saren sat on the edge of the spare chair, poised to flee at the first sign of threat, her luminescent skin cycling through nervous patterns of pale blue and silver that Cassandra was beginning to recognize as anxiety responses. The nutritional synthesizer can produce basic protein combinations, Cassandra was explaining, though she suspected Saren was only half listening. "I don't know what Lumini dietary requirements are, but Arya has been analyzing your biological readings since you agreed to come up here." "Dr. Vale," Arya's voice carried a note of excitement that somehow managed to sound poetic. "I've cross-referenced Saren's metabolic indicators with the xenobiological databases, and I'm pleased to report that her species' nutritional needs are quite compatible with our synthesis capabilities. Though I must say, discovering a living Lumini is rather like finding Atlantis in one's backyard, mythical wonders emerging from the depths of impossibility." Saren's head tilted at Arya's dramatic phrasing, and for the first time since Cassandra had found her, something that might have been amusement flickered across her features. "Your artificial intelligence speaks strangely," she said, her standard improving noticeably now that she wasn't whispering in fear. "Like the ancient song spinners of my people, but with different rhythms. Arya has been developing personality quirks during our isolation," Cassandra explained, shooting a warning look at the nearest speaker. "She's become obsessed with Earth poetry." "Poetry?" Saren's skin patterns brightened to curious gold. "Your people create songwords without music." "Some of us do, yes. Arya, maybe demonstrate with something less dramatic than your usual repertoire." "Of course, though I feel the road not taken by Frost seems appropriate for our current situation. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Saren listened to the recitation with rapt attention, her skin patterns shifting to complex spirals that Cassandra suspected indicated deep thought. When Arya finished, Saren was quiet for a long moment. "Your artificial mind speaks of choosing paths," she said finally. "This is familiar concept. My people also spoke of the choosing roads, the moments when one decision changes all that follows." "Like deciding to trust me instead of staying hidden?" Cassandra asked gently. Saren's skin flickered through rapid color changes, what might have been embarrassment or vulnerability. "Yes, though I am not certain it was choosing, more like desperation." The synthesizer chimed, indicating that it had finished preparing the meal Arya had designed based on Saren's biological requirements. Cassandra served it onto 2 plates, noting how Saren's eyes tracked her every movement with the hypervigilance of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "How long since you've had a proper meal?" Cassandra asked as she set the food in front of her guest. "Time becomes strange when alone," Saren replied, but she began eating with the careful intensity of someone who had been hungry for too long. "Emergency supplies, mostly. Some hydroponics I managed to grow in the lower levels, though the conditions were not optimal." "You've been growing food down there." Cassandra felt a surge of admiration. "That's incredibly resourceful." "Survival requires adaptation," Saren said simply. "My research team taught me much about making life from difficult circumstances before." Her voice trailed off, and her skin patterns shifted to darker blues that Cassandra was learning to associate with painful memories. "Before what happened to them?" Cassandra asked carefully. Saren set down her eating utensil, her hands trembling slightly. "You study my people's ruins, yes. The archaeologist work." "Yes. I'm trying to understand Lumini civilization, how you lived, what happened to your species." "We are not extinct," Saren said with sudden intensity. "My people live still in the far systems in the hidden places, but we made mistakes, great mistakes that cost much." Cassandra leaned forward, her scientific curiosity warring with her concern for Saren's obvious distress. "What kind of mistakes?" Instead of answering directly, Saren stood and moved to the window that showed the station's view of the dying star. Her skin patterns had shifted to deep purples and reds that seemed to pulse with emotional pain. "Dr. Vale," Arya said quietly, "I'm reading elevated stress indicators from Saren. Perhaps this conversation should continue when she's had more time to adjust to her new circumstances." "Arya's right," Cassandra said, standing to join Saren at the window. "I'm sorry. I got carried away by scientific curiosity when I should have been thinking about your well-being." "Your curiosity is not wrong," Saren replied, though she didn't turn away from the window. "You deserve to understand what you have found, but the telling is difficult, painful." Cassandra reached out carefully, not quite touching but offering the possibility of contact. "Then we'll take it slow. There's no rush." Saren looked at her outstretched hand, then at Cassandra's face, and slowly reached out to clasp their fingers together. The tingling sensation was stronger this time, and Cassandra could swear she felt something beyond physical contact, an echo of emotion, perhaps, or the ghost of thoughts that weren't quite her own. "Your touch is warm," Saren said softly. "It has been very long since I felt warmth from another living being." "How long have you been alone on this station?" "Cycles, many cycles. I stopped counting after the first year when I realized that no rescue would come." "A year?" Cassandra felt horror at the implications. "Saren, you've been surviving alone down there for over a year." "Longer, much longer. Time becomes fluid when there are no others to mark its passage with shared moments." The weight of that isolation settled over Cassandra like a physical thing. Her own 6 months of solitude had been difficult enough, and she'd had regular communications with the outside universe, supply deliveries, the knowledge that her assignment was temporary. Saren had been completely cut off, with no certainty that anyone would ever find her or that her situation would ever change. "You're not alone anymore," Cassandra said firmly. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Saren's skin patterns brightened to warm gold, but her expression remained cautious. "You say this now, but when you learn what I am, what my people did, you may change your feelings. Try me." Before Saren could respond, Arya's voice filled the quarters with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Forgive the interruption, but I believe both of you would benefit from rest. Saren's biometric readings suggest exhaustion, and Dr. Vale, your stress levels have been elevated for hours. Perhaps morning will bring better circumstances for difficult conversations." Cassandra realized she was indeed exhausted. The emotional intensity of finding and rescuing Saren had drained her more than she'd realized. And looking at her guest, she could see the toll that years of survival and isolation had taken. "Arya's right. You can take the bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch." "No," Saren said quickly. "I cannot take your sleeping place. I will use the floor, or return to the maintenance levels." "Absolutely not," Cassandra interrupted. "You're not going back to hiding in storage areas. The bedroom has a proper bed, climate control, and privacy. It's yours for as long as you need it." Saren's skin flickered through rapid patterns of what looked like gratitude mixed with disbelief. "Why do you offer such kindness to someone you do not know?" The question was fair, and Cassandra found herself considering it seriously. Why had she immediately offered shelter and safety to an alien woman she just met? Why had her first instinct been protection rather than scientific opportunity or personal caution? "Because you asked for help," she said finally. "Because you've been alone and afraid for too long, and because nobody deserves to live like that. Even an alien whose people may have committed terrible acts." "Even then," Cassandra said without hesitation, "you're not responsible for your entire species' choices, just like I'm not responsible for every mistake humans have ever made." Saren studied her face for a long moment, her large eyes reflecting the ambient light in patterns that seemed almost like tears. "Your species must be very different from mine to produce such compassion." "I think compassion is probably more universal than any of us realize," Cassandra replied. "We just don't always get the chance to express it." As they prepared for sleep, Saren hesitantly accepting the offer of clean clothes and privacy, Cassandra making up the couch with extra pillows, Arya provided a gentle acoustic backdrop of what she claimed was restorative ambient poetry. "Arya," Cassandra called out softly as she settled onto the couch, "thank you for the translation help today, and for suggesting we get some rest." Dr. Vale, discovering Saren, is perhaps the most significant xenobiological event in recorded history. But more than that, it's a reminder that the universe still holds wonders we haven't imagined. As Whitman wrote, "I contain multitudes." Tonight, our little station contains multitudes as well. From the bedroom came Saren's voice, soft but carrying clearly. "Your artificial intelligence speaks wisdom, Cassandra Vale. Perhaps tomorrow we will both contain different multitudes than we did today." As Cassandra drifted toward sleep for the first time in months without the oppressive weight of complete isolation, she reflected that Saren was probably right. Finding each other had changed them both already, in ways they were only beginning to understand. And somehow, despite all the unknowns and potential complications ahead, that change felt like the first hopeful thing that had happened to either of them in a very long time. 3 weeks into their cautious cohabitation, Cassandra had learned that Saren's bioluminescent patterns were as expressive as human facial expressions, and far more difficult to hide. This morning, those patterns were cycling through deep reds and purples that spoke of distress and internal conflict, as she helped Cassandra repair the communication array that had been malfunctioning since before her arrival. "The quantum resonance modulators are completely out of phase," Saren was saying, her hands moving with practiced efficiency over components that should have been unfamiliar to her. "Your people's technology is different from ours, but the underlying principles are similar." Cassandra watched with fascination, as Saren's touch seemed to coax the recalcitrant machinery into cooperation. Over the past weeks, she'd noticed that station systems often functioned better when Saren was nearby, as if her presence somehow harmonized with the electronic infrastructure in ways that defied conventional understanding. "You're remarkably skilled with technology for someone whose people supposedly abandoned advanced machinery thousands of years ago," Cassandra observed carefully. Saren's skin patterns flickered to guilty oranges before settling back to the troubled purples. "My people did not abandon technology, Cassandra Vale. We learned to fear it. There is a difference." "Arya," Cassandra called out, "are you monitoring our repair progress?" "Indeed. And I must say, Watching Saren work with our systems brings to mind Yeats, the second coming. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Though in this case, it appears the center is quite literally being held together by Saren's remarkable abilities. But Arya, perhaps less apocalyptic poetry during technical work. Of course, though I should mention that several systems throughout the station have been operating at improved efficiency since Saren's arrival. It's as if her presence creates some form of beneficial interference with our electronic processes. Cassandra noted how Saren's patterns shifted to deeper purples at Arya's observation. Saren, what aren't you telling me? For a moment, it seemed like Saren might deflect the question again, as she had been doing for weeks whenever conversations approached dangerous topics. But then her shoulders sagged, and her skin settled into patterns that looked like resignation mixed with fear. The communication array, she said quietly, once it functions properly, it will send signals into space. Signals that might be detected by those who search for people like me. People are searching for you. Not me specifically. But, yes, there are those who would find great value in capturing one of my kind, especially one with my particular abilities. Cassandra set down her tools, giving Saren her full attention. What abilities? Instead of answering verbally, Saren reached out to touch the communication array's main processing unit. Immediately, the entire system came online with smooth efficiency, its diagnostic displays showing perfect calibration across all functions. But more than that, Cassandra could swear she heard something, a faint harmonic resonance that seemed to emanate from the machinery itself. My people call it the deep listening, Saren explained, her skin patterns now showing complex spirals of gold and silver. We can interface directly with quantum systems, understand their patterns, guide their functions. It was what made us valuable as researchers, engineers, technicians. And what made you valuable to others who wanted to exploit that ability. Saren nodded, her patterns darkening again. The research expedition I was part of, we were not here by choice. We were brought here to investigate something specific, something that our captors believed would benefit from Lumini technical abilities. Cassandra felt cold dread settling in her stomach. What were they looking for? Before Saren could answer, the communication array suddenly blazed to life with incoming transmission signals. Dozens of them, all trying to connect simultaneously. Emergency broadcasts, distress calls, and what sounded like automated warning messages flooded the speakers. Arya, what's happening? Multiple priority communications incoming from various sources. Arya reported with uncharacteristic tension. Dr. Vale, several of these appear to be military-grade emergency transmissions, and I'm detecting at least 3 different vessels changing course toward our coordinates. Saren's skin had gone completely white, her patterns frozen in what Cassandra recognized as terror. They have found us. The signals, they have led them here. Who has found us? The ones who brought my team to this place. The ones who seek to weaponize what we discovered. The communication array erupted with an incoming priority transmission that overrode all other signals. A harsh voice filled Cassandra's quarters, speaking in clipped, authoritative tones. Research Station Omega-7, this is Commander Thorne of the Corporate Security Division. We are responding to unauthorized activation of classified communication equipment. Prepare for boarding and inspection. Corporate Security. Cassandra looked at Saren, whose terror was now palpable. What does corporate security want with a xenoarchaeology research station? Not the station, Saren whispered. What lies beneath it? What my people were forced to investigate before the containment protocols failed. Containment protocols for what? The lights throughout the station suddenly flickered, and Arya's voice carried a note of alarm. Dr. Vale, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the lower levels. Something is activating in the maintenance areas where Saren has been living. The old systems, Saren said, standing abruptly. The ones I tried so hard not to disturb. The communication array, It has sent activation signals through the station's network. The Lumini technology is waking up. As if to confirm her words, a deep harmonic resonance began. 2 years later, Dr. Cassandra Vale stood in the observation deck of Research Station, Omega 7's new monitoring facility, watching automated containment drones conduct their weekly inspection of the sealed Lumini weapons vault 3 kilometers below the station. The harmonic resonance that had once threatened to tear reality apart was now contained within quantum isolation fields, monitored by systems that Saren had designed to prevent accidental activation while preserving the technology for study by future generations who might be wise enough to handle it properly. The isolation fields are holding at optimal parameters, Saren reported from her position at the monitoring station, her skin patterns showing the calm gold spirals that Cassandra had learned indicated professional satisfaction. No fluctuations in the quantum containment matrix, and all security protocols remain stable. Excellent, Cassandra replied, moving to stand beside her partner, a word that had come to encompass so much more than their professional collaboration. Arya, any updates on the Academic Council's review of our containment protocols? Dr. Vale, I'm pleased to report that the Council has approved our methodology for long-term preservation and study of potentially dangerous alien technologies, Arya announced with obvious pride. They were particularly impressed by our innovative approach to balancing scientific inquiry with responsible security measures. Though they did suggest that future reports contain fewer poetic metaphors about the nature of cosmic responsibility. I can't imagine where they got that impression, Cassandra said dryly, noting how Saren's skin flickered with amusement. Their solution to the Lumini weapons crisis had been elegantly simple in concept, impossibly complex in execution. Rather than attempting to destroy technology that couldn't be safely dismantled, they had created a monitoring station dedicated to containing and studying it while warning other civilizations about its dangers. The process had required Saren to interface directly with the ancient weapon systems, a procedure that had nearly killed her and had definitely traumatized them both. But it had resulted in the first comprehensive understanding of Lumini defensive technology in thousands of years. Cassandra, Saren said, turning from her monitoring station to face her with an expression of gentle concern, you're thinking about that day again. Your stress patterns always shift when you remember the weapons vault. It's hard not to think about it, Cassandra admitted, when I watch you work with systems that almost cost us everything. The memory was still vivid, Saren's skin cycling through patterns of agony as she'd forced her consciousness deep into the weapons control matrix, her body convulsing as alien technology interfaced directly with her nervous system. The moment when her patterns had gone completely dark and Cassandra had thought she'd lost her forever. The weapons had finally accepted Saren's shutdown commands, but only after she'd proven her willingness to sacrifice herself to prevent their misuse. But we survived, Saren said gently, reaching out to take Cassandra's hand in the gesture that had become their most familiar form of comfort. We survived, and we prevented a catastrophe, and we found a way to turn something destructive into something that protects others. The tingling sensation of their joined hands had evolved over 2 years from alien curiosity to intimate familiarity, but it still carried that faint echo of shared thoughts and emotions that reminded Cassandra daily how remarkable their connection was. Dr. Vale, Saren, Arya interjected with the diplomatic tone she developed for interrupting personal moments. We have an incoming transmission from the Academic Council. It appears to be marked as priority communication. The transmission resolved into a holographic display showing Director Reynolds, the elderly human woman who oversaw interspecies research initiatives for the Academy. Her expression carried the kind of serious excitement that usually meant either very good news or very complicated problems. Dr. Vale, Saren, congratulations on another successful quarter of containment operations. Director Reynolds began. Your facility has become the model for responsible xenoarchaeological research throughout the sector, which brings me to the reason for this transmission. Cassandra and Saren exchanged glances, both recognizing the tone that preceded major requests. We've received word of another discovery, ancient vegan technology on a research station in the beta sector that's showing signs of autonomous activation. The local research team is out of their depth, and corporate security is already making inquiries about securing the technology for military applications. They want us to establish another monitoring facility, Saren said, her skin patterns shifting to thoughtful silver. Exactly. Your expertise with dangerous alien technologies, combined with your established protocols for containment and study, makes you the obvious choice for handling this situation. The Academy is prepared to fund a full expedition, with your facility as the administrative base for a new department of xenotechnology safety. Cassandra felt excitement stirring in her chest at the possibility, not just of new discoveries, but of expanding their work to prevent other civilizations from making the same mistakes with alien technology that had nearly destroyed them. What's the timeline? She asked. The Beta Sector team is requesting immediate assistance. If you're willing to take on the assignment, we could have transport arranged within the week. After the transmission ended, Cassandra and Saren stood in comfortable silence, both processing the implications of the offer. Outside the observation deck's windows, the dying star continued its ancient fade, casting their workspace in the red light that had become the familiar backdrop to their life together. It would mean leaving Omega 7, Saren said finally. This place has been our home for 2 years. It would also mean helping other people avoid the kind of trauma you experienced with your research team, Cassandra replied. And it would mean working together on something that matters. Saren's skin patterns brightened to the warm gold that indicated happiness mixed with anticipation. When you say it like that, the choice becomes quite simple. Arya, what do you think? Ready for another adventure in xenotechnological crisis management? Dr. Vale, I must confess that the prospect of exploring new forms of potentially catastrophic alien technology fills me with the kind of excitement that Byron might have described as a burning fever of the heart. Though I should add that I've been composing epic poetry about our experiences here, and I believe our story deserves a more dramatic conclusion than simply filing final reports and packing equipment. What kind of dramatic conclusion did you have in mind? Cassandra asked with amusement. Well, there is one significant administrative detail that remains unresolved in our current status reports. Cassandra looked at Saren, who was now glowing with patterns that seemed to pulse with anticipation and something that looked very much like hope. Arya, Saren said slowly, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I am merely noting that the Academy's personnel files list you both as research partners, which is a rather sterile description for individuals who have saved each other's lives, built a new field of xenoarchaeological safety protocols, and spent 2 years creating a life together that encompasses professional collaboration, emotional intimacy, and shared responsibility for preventing galactic catastrophes. Cassandra felt her heart racing as she understood what Arya was hinting at. You're talking about making our partnership official. I'm talking about recognizing what already exists, Arya replied with unusual gentleness. 2 beings who found each other in darkness and chose to build something bright and meaningful together. Saren's skin was now cycling through the most beautiful patterns Cassandra had ever seen, spirals of gold and silver and soft blue that seemed to contain entire galaxies of emotion. When she spoke, her voice carried the same wonder it had held that first night when she'd whispered please in the maintenance levels. Cassandra Vale, she said formally, would you consent to be bound